And we're live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. Mostly good news in the weather forecast today and for the next few days. For the most part, calm weather over the lower 48. We do have one system, though, that we have to talk about. There's actually two parts to it. There's this one snowstorm here in the Midwest that's going to be moving through right now and then moving into the Northeast later today. And actually, on the back end of that, it's technically all the same system, but there's another little part of it that's going to be dropping down here into Texas, reorganizing, bringing in a bunch of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and then moving through the southeast, through the Ohio Valley, and then finally up into the Midwest and Northeast as well. So that's the main story we're going to be tracking today. The other big part of this story is what's going on in the Northwest. You can see it's a brief moment of clear skies, and then this new system comes in, and this one actually looks bigger than the last one. There's a chance for over 3 feet of snow in some places and some 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts to go along with it, creating a blizzard warning in some areas. So those are the two big stories we're going to be talking about today. We'll also go into the different temperatures. For the most part, the eastern half of the country is much warmer than they were last week, so that is some good news there. Now, as always, there's going to be a lot that we're talking about today, so if you're only interested in one of the regions, you can click down in the time bar below to go directly to the region you're interested in. I also put that in the comments if you want to click the times there as well. And then also, I do these forecasts every single morning, so you might want to double check and make sure this is in fact my most recent forecast, because as we've seen throughout a lot of these forecasts over the last few weeks, staying up to date with the most current information is crucial because the weather models like to change. So the first thing I always like to do is just take a good look at the warnings map, because that gives you a good snapshot of where the biggest weather events are happening over the next 24 to 48 hours. And as you can see, the majority of this map is completely blank. It looks like we have this winter weather advisory or watch up here in Washington and Oregon, and then right here, it's not showing on this map, but right between Idaho and Montana, that's where our blizzard warning is in effect. And then where you see these brown colors right here, that's where we actually have high wind warnings, and it's all associated with that low pressure system as well. This also paints a little picture of what's going on in the Midwest and Northeast. Small area covered by that winter weather watch or advisory. Let's see which one it is. Yeah, it looks like it's an advisory up there. So that's because they're getting some light snow throughout the day today. What we're really going to want to watch is what happens after that system reorganizes down here and then moves up, because that looks like it's going to be the bigger of the two affecting the Midwest and Northeast. If we look at the winter storm severity index, I always like to look at this because it just gives you a good snapshot of how big a storm is actually going to be. For example, that little snowstorm moving through the Midwest and Northeast this morning and then into this afternoon, limited to minor impacts. That one, we're not going to spend too much time on today because it doesn't look like it's all that big of a storm, maybe just a couple inches of snow. Now, the next one coming up could have some extreme winds with it as well and a little bit more snow, so that's why we'll spend more time on that second system. But the first thing I want to really dive into in this video, and we'll do it after the national overview, is what's going on here in the Northwest, because you can see this is an area where we actually have the yellow is the minor, orange is moderate, red is major, and then that purple color is where you actually have extreme impacts. So their exact definition of that, they say extensive and widespread severe property damage, life-saving actions will be needed, results in extreme disruptions to daily life. So that's the exact definition and why that's, I think, the top story for today. What's going on in Washington and Oregon and Idaho, getting into Montana as well. And there's really two factors of that. There's the precipitation, and then there's also the wind speed combining into just a major winter storm up there. And if we want to actually look at what's going on in the overall view, showing the pattern, the big thing to look out for, actually there's three big things. One is this second pattern that we have moving into the northwest. That's that second storm that's creating those major expectations for impacts to even extreme, where we're going to be getting maybe 2 to 3 feet of snowfall. That's all in that next little trough that's going to be building through and staying over Washington and Oregon all the way until Saturday. Now, the other part of this map you want to keep your eye out for is what's going on here in the Midwest, Northeast, and down here in the South. And it's all tied to what happens with this trough throughout the day today. You'll see one little part of it. You can see the little dip in the isobars right there. That's what's bringing some light snow to the Midwest this morning, and then you'll see that little dip goes off and hits the Northeast later today. But if we back it up, you'll notice something that happens to this trough. It actually splits in two. That top part goes and hits the Midwest, bringing some light snow there right now. This back end actually drops down and almost becomes its own little system, digging all the way down into Arizona, New Mexico, and then finally into Texas. And it looks like this is actually what's going to be driving this next storm that looks to be the bigger of the two, affecting the eastern half of the country. That's going to be collecting a bunch of moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and then you can see how it just moves right through Texas, through Arkansas, then through the Ohio Valley, up into the Midwest, and then into the Northeast. So that's what it looks like. If you want to actually see the precipitation that's going to happen with those two different systems, you can see it on this map. Right there you see that the top part of the system that's going through the Midwest right now, and then into the Northeast later today. Just some light snow. For the most part, it's warm temperatures up in that region, so we're not getting any of those major ice storms that we had last week, or 8 to 10 inches of snow. Looks like it's just a couple inches. And then on the back end here, you start to see that second part of the system, the back end of it, that drop down, starting to bring some snow into Colorado. And then you'll notice it starts to combine as, think of the winds pulling in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico right here. You actually can see these rain bands move farther into Texas and almost combine with that snowstorm there. So right there is when it's almost completely combined. Right there is when the storm has fully strengthened and is already bringing some heavy rain to Texas. Then that's just going to continue. It's going to continue to bring in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, start bringing that heavy rain to Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, up into Tennessee, and then Kentucky. And then we're actually going to get some snow in West Virginia, Virginia, and North Carolina with that system as well. Looks like less snow than the model run was showing yesterday, but we'll look at the exact totals and timing of that event. Then finally, you see that storm combine with a low up here in Canada to bring a little bit more snow to the Midwest and finally the Northeast. So just to back it up, just in case you missed it, we have that snow going through up top, and then we have the new system collecting down low and then moving up the east coast right there. And then all the while that's happening, we have a new system pushing through the Northwest that's going to be bringing large amounts of snow to Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and parts of Montana. For the most part, California, though, missing out. So if we want to see the precipitation that's going to pile up, right there is where, remember, that's when it's just starting to bring in some of that rain, start to combine with that Colorado storm right there, and then right about there is when the storm has strengthened right over Texas, and then you'll see this strip just go right through Tennessee, Kentucky, through West Virginia, and then it works its way up into the Northeast. So this map is mostly useful for looking at where we're going to be getting rainfall. Parts of the Southeast could be getting 3 to 5 inches of rain with this system by Sunday, stretching through Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky. We're going to spend the majority of our time in this region on those locations because that's where the greatest strip of rainfall appears to be. It almost looks like a little lightning bolt right there. And then the other part of the precipitation story is what's going on with the snowfall. So there is that tiny bit of snowfall we're getting throughout the day today, maybe 4 to 5 inches in the very northern parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, working into northern locations of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. And then a couple things you'll notice here. One, that second part of the system, the back end of this one, starts to drop down into Colorado. And then right here, you can almost see it do a little U. And then it's going to shoot up and bring some snow to West Virginia, North Carolina, before going up into the Northeast and bringing a little more snow to the Midwest. And then while that's happening, I know we're jumping back and forth here, but it's just because there's kind of two stories going on at once. While that's happening, that new system's pushing into the Northwest, and just watch the snow pile up in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and parts of Montana. Oregon looks like you're going to be getting over a foot. Washington looks like you could be getting over 3 feet of snow with that system. And again, there are some extreme winds that I will show in a second. But first, I just want to show what kind of precipitation we're expecting 6 to 10 days out. So everything I just showed you is going 3 to 5 days out. This is what we're looking at from March 1st to March 5th. This is showing, at least from these climatology models, it looks like the Northwest is going to have a change in behavior. It seems like we've had that persistent storm system after storm system coming right through Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana. Just for the last 2 weeks, it seems like that's been a nonstop conveyor belt of winter storms. And it looks like this next one that we're getting and talking about today could be the last one, because at least for a little while, because this map is showing by the 1st to the 5th, we're going to be switching to a dry pattern. Now, where there's expected to be precipitation. Again, this is a little farther in the forecast, so you can't say this is guaranteed to happen. But it looks like the eastern half of the country will be switching to more precipitation. That's most likely going to be rainfall in there instead of snow, because the temperature forecast is looking warmer in this region as well. So if we want to look even farther into the forecast, this is now looking at March 3rd to March 9th. That pattern continues but weakens a little bit. Looks like we're still dry over majority of the Northwest, and then this little strip going from the Midwest down to the Southeast, just that little area right there. Looks like that's where we're expecting precipitation 8 to 14 days out. Now, like I said, there's 2 parts to this story. One, it's the precipitation, the snow we're getting, whether you're talking about Washington or Oregon or Wisconsin or New York or anywhere. That's one part of the story, the snow you're getting and the amount of rain you're getting. The other part of the story is what's going on with the wind gusts. And you can actually see this storm system has already moved into the center of the country, and then you'll see those winds move across into the Midwest and Northeast as that system moves through. And again, that's the top part of the system. Meanwhile, we're also getting some high winds in California. That's about the only thing weather-wise that's going on in California, so I will mention that later, showing that on a localized slide. But that's the top part of the system, and then you'll watch as 2 things happen here. One, that new system works into the Northwest. We're going to be seeing some 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts, which is why there's actually a blizzard warning in place in this region. Actually, it's right above Idaho and Montana is where we're going to be seeing that blizzard warning, but you can see the extreme winds stretch all the way through Washington, Oregon, Idaho, over 50 mile per hour wind gusts. Now, you're also going to see these extreme winds pop up right above Tennessee and Kentucky as that lower system has already moved through Texas, pulled in energy from the Gulf of Mexico, and then starts working its way up through Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, Virginia, and then finally into the Northeast, where we're also going to be seeing those 55 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts as we get into the day Saturday. And then it looks like by the weekend, things for the most part look like they've calmed down. So that's maybe the bad news of the story, the fact that we're mixing that snowfall with extreme wind gusts, because that's where you can reduce visibility and lead to some dangerous conditions. Where the good news is that there has been a significant warm-up since the last 2 weeks. Remember that Arctic blast of cold air that we seem to be talking about for 2 weeks straight caused the major ice storms down in Texas, Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, piling up 1/2 inch to even more than 1/2 inch of ice at some times. Remember that same Arctic blast caused all those power outages in Texas? Well, that was all mostly due to those massive ice storms we were having, and there's good news in the forecast. I've actually been clicking through this. You might not have even realized it, but that's just because there's barely any ice piling up whatsoever. We might get a tiny little sliver in North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia getting into the weekend, but compared to last week, remember we had a giant strip going all the way from Texas all the way up into Pennsylvania of over a half an inch of ice, which is, in my opinion, more dangerous than wind gusts of 45 miles per hour. So I would say for the most part, good news in the forecast, as it looks like that's the only ice we're going to be getting across the entire country for the next 5 days. And then, like I said, the main reason for that is because there has been a major warm-up. Remember, just last week, it almost seems amazing that it was just last week that this was happening, comparing it to this map we're looking at today. But down here in Texas, we had 45 to 50 degree below average temperatures. The actual temperatures in some cases were below zero all the way down here in Texas. Remember, that's what led to all the power outages. And now you can see the majority of the country is actually above average temperatures. And down here in Texas, we're actually seeing some temperatures 15 degrees above average. So that is some great news to hear, as I'm sure there's still plenty of people without power. So it's at least good to know that there's not as much of a necessity to heat your home as the temperatures have warmed up for you. Where we do have some cold air though is in the northwest, and we're actually going to see that continue, and these patterns almost strengthen in their comparison. Might be a weird way to say it, but the northwest is actually going to start to see colder temperatures while the east starts to see some warmer temperatures. So it's going to be maybe 15 to 20 degrees below average in the northwest, and then the east is going to be pushing to 15 to 20 degrees above average. It seems like there's a split right between the country, which appears to be continuing for quite some time. So this is now getting all the way into Sunday, and it looks like the same kind of pattern is still over the country. Cold in the northwest, above average throughout the rest of the country. So if we want to actually see the temperatures that we're expecting, let's just go to this afternoon and to this evening. Right there, we'll look at the East Coast first, because then we have to do the time change to look at the highs for the West Coast. Looks like the highs for today on the east, or in the northeast, are going to be in the mid 40s. Down in the southeast, we're going to be in the high 60s. Great to see those temperatures in Texas getting back into the 70s. Like I said, above average down there. And it looks like we have a pretty defined cold front moving in. That is the cold front moving in as that new system pushes through. I hadn't really thought about that yet, but that is that low pressure system bringing some of that cold air down. Now, as we get into our first, let's look at the highs for the west. That's where we have some colder air. You can see, if you want an easier way to look at this map, the blue color is where you're below freezing. So we do see those below freezing temperatures in the west here. California, still pretty warm though. That's the one area that's kind of missing out on all this winter weather. Seems like it's going right into Washington and Oregon and just scraping over California. So that's where we have those, actually in some cases, below zero temperatures in the northwest. And then as we get into this weekend, it looks like that pattern just continues. Some below freezing temperatures throughout the northwest, some mid 30s to mid 40s in the Midwest, looking at some maybe 30s and 40s in the Northeast, and then down in the Southeast, we're in the mid to even high 70s in some places. So that was everything that's going on for the next 3 to 5 days. If we want to look at the average farther out into the forecast, this is what's expected March 1st to March 5th, and it looks pretty similar. We have those below average temperatures in the west. The center of the country looks like the little Goldilocks zone between the two, and then the eastern half of the country is where we're looking above average and warm. So that's something to think about, because that's also coincides with where we're expecting the precipitation. So when you mix the precip with the warm temperatures, it's much more likely that you're going to be getting rain versus all that snow and ice that we had last week. I'd say damage-wise, that's some good news there. And then as we get farther out in the forecast, looking at the 3rd to the 9th, looks like this pattern is going to continue, and some of that warm air is actually even going to stretch farther into the middle of the country. The whole west below average, almost the entire eastern half of the country above average, especially getting up there in the Midwest. So that's the big story of what's going on with the precipitation, the temperatures, the wind. Now let's actually start to dive into the regions themselves. And I think a good place to start is always the west, because our weather moves from west to east. So what happens to the west will eventually affect what's going on with the east. As we're seeing with that system that's developing and we're going to be talking about throughout the day today, first came in as a snowstorm up here, then that's going to be the one we're diving into later that's going to bring heavy rain to Texas and then finally bring some snow into the northeast. But the first place I want to dive into is the northwest here. So we're getting the last little effects of that snowstorm that's now moving through the Midwest. And then it looks like we're in the clear throughout most of the day today. And then as we get into early Thursday morning, this new system starts to show up and then spreads heavy amounts of snow to Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming for a number of days. There aren't really any periods where it just looks like extreme snowfall where we're getting 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour. It just looks like it's constant for a number of days, which is why we're going to be picking up such large totals. It's because the totals are going to just continue to add on and add on and add on to each other. So if we want to see that another way, there's that last snowstorm that moved through. That's what's bringing the last little traces of snowfall to Washington and Oregon throughout this morning and into this afternoon. Then we'll be in the clear. And then right when you think you're in the clear, this new system moves in early Thursday morning. And one thing you'll notice here is where that system looks to be isolated, where you see those bars the closest together, that's where the storm is going to be the strongest, looks to be right above Washington and Oregon. And then by the time you get down to California, looks like we're, for the most part, out of this system. So that's going to move through there and kind of hang out all the way until Saturday and Sunday before finally moving off into the center of the country. And there, I gave you a little sneak peek of something we'll be talking about with the California forecast, what's going on with that cutoff low right there, because it's actually different from what was showing up yesterday. And again, something we'll have to watch all week long to see what happens with that. So just taking a more local look at what's going on in the west, there's that lingering snow from that last system. Then we're in the clear. Then the new one builds in early Thursday morning, starting to bring snowfall to Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana. And remember, this is mixed with some extreme winds. So that's why we have that blizzard warning in effect. So there are some periods where Washington looks like it's getting some heavier snow. Oregon, Idaho, Montana look to remain relatively on the lighter end, maybe 0.1 inches per hour. Washington has some heavier snow, but there's never a point where it's 0.5 inches per hour or where we see a purple color in here. But what you'll notice is that as that storm comes in, the Cascades, and especially up here in northern Washington, just stay covered in snow for a long period of time. So that's why the totals are able to increase as much as they are, as I'll show on this map right here. So there's that what's left to fall with that system today. Just a couple more inches, maybe 6 inches in the highest elevations. What's really going to bring some snow, though, is that next system. As we click through here, by Sunday, it looks like northern parts of the Cascades in Washington picking up over 3 feet of snow. Down here in Oregon, looks like we're picking up over a foot of snow and over a foot of snow in Idaho as well. So the real key spot to focus on there is Washington, because we're going to be mixing those extreme snowfall totals with these wind gusts here. It looks like it calms down as that last storm has moved out, and then as the new one moves in, right early Thursday morning into Thursday afternoon, when all that snow was starting to come in, we're mixing it with 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts throughout the center of the state and in the higher elevations for sure, but almost throughout the entire state, we're seeing wind gusts over 35 miles per hour. And then what you'll notice is as that system spreads out and starts bringing snow to Oregon, Idaho, the extreme winds are going to spread out as well, bringing some 55 to maybe even 60 to 65 mile per hour wind gusts down to Oregon and Idaho, working their way even into Wyoming. And California actually has a high wind warning in effect as well. So let's just look at the timing. Looks like that first system is gone for the most part today. Might have picked up some very last traces of snow. And then the new one moves in 4 a.m. on Thursday. And then by 10 a.m. on Thursday, we're still picking up snow. And just watch how long the Cascades remain in that snowfall. It's not gone until about 10 a.m. on Saturday. So like I said, there's no period where it looks like it's all that extreme. Where you're getting the most snow might be about 4 a.m. on Friday. But there's no period where you're getting half an inch per hour. Just looks like you're picking up decent snowfall. One sec here, I have to cover up where there's some sunshine coming through the window and just straight blinding me. Okay, continuing. So what I was saying is there's no period where it's very heavy snowfall in Washington. It's just able to continue to tack on because it's going all the way from Thursday at 4 a.m. until Saturday at 4 a.m. Picking up snow for a number of days. If we want to actually see that come in, clicking through here all the way till Saturday at 4 a.m. getting into Sunday, the system's gone. Looks like northern Cascades over 3 feet of snow. And then it's almost a gradient as you push into Oregon. You start to get to 1 foot of snow, and then as you get into southern parts of Oregon, that's where you're getting 6 to 8 inches of snow. And like I said, you're mixing it with the extreme winds. So let's actually go back and look at where were we picking up the greatest snowfall. Right around 4 a.m. on Friday. So let's see if that coincides with extreme winds, because if it does, that would be the key time to look out for. It looks like those winds come in 4 p.m. Thursday is when we're starting to see them, and then 4 a.m. Friday, when we're picking up that heavy snow, is also where we're going to have 45 to, looks like almost even 60 mile per hour wind gusts. So I believe that's the key time to keep in mind with this system early Friday morning into about 10 a.m. on Friday. That looks to be where you're getting the most snow and the most wind. So with that in mind, it actually makes sense why we're expecting some extreme to major impacts throughout much of central Washington in the Cascades. And then we're also seeing some major impacts here in Idaho. That's where we're picking up over a foot of snow as well with those 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts. There's actually a blizzard warning in effect right there, just a winter weather warning up here in Washington. But one thing that you'll notice on this map is not much is going on with California. And part of the reason for that, as I click through here, you'll see we missed out on that last system. And then this next one that's bringing the 3 feet of snow to Washington just looks like it's going straight through the northern states and just scraping the very top of California. Now, where this map gets interesting is what was showing up yesterday. Yesterday, it showed that this cutoff low right here was actually going to move over Southern California and bring some rain and snow to SoCal. It was going to be the first system SoCal had gotten in quite some time, but as of right now, that cutoff low does not seem to be making its way all the way to California. So if we click through there, it was expected to break off Sunday afternoon, and then it looks like it just makes its way to Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and then gets absorbed back into the overall weather pattern. So looking at the California forecast, if you're in Southern California and you were looking forward to some rain and snow, unfortunately doesn't look like that's going to be in the cards, at least according to this forecast model. Like I said, it's changed since yesterday, so most likely it's going to change by tomorrow. So as we click through there, that's where that cutoff low has bent off into Nevada, Utah, working its way down into Arizona and New Mexico. But as of right now, looks like California is missing out on that. But again, we'll have to keep our eye on it because forecast models change, and that's not till Sunday. So I guarantee by Sunday it will change. Now, the one thing California does have, besides the sunshine and the warm weather right now, are some extreme winds. I got the notification on my phone this morning that there's a high wind warning. And you can see that that is going to be in effect throughout the day today, working into tomorrow. We have around the Bay Area 35 to 40 mile per hour wind gusts. And then up in the Sierras, looks like we actually have over 60 mile per hour wind gusts. So that is one thing to think about. Looks like those winds are going to be spreading down into SoCal on Thursday. looking at 40 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts. So something to keep in mind there, but just had to mention it because that is the one thing going on for California. So that's the broad story of what's going on in the West. And again, what happens to the West ends up affecting what's going on in the eastern half of the country. For example, that snow that you see going through the Midwest there and then the Northeast today, that started as a snowstorm in Washington. Now, the other part of that system that we're going to dive into now is the back end of it. And you'll see it's actually connected with that snow moving through the Midwest right now. It's that snow that you're going to start to see popping up in Colorado. It's the back end of that system that's stretched out. And then that's going to work its way down into Texas, bring in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and then become its own little system right here. That's going to bring heavy rain, Texas, Arkansas, into Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, and then even bring some snow to places like West Virginia, North Carolina, before moving up into the Midwest and Northeast. So that's where we want to focus on next as that system bends down into Texas and then brings some weather to basically all the states in the eastern half of the country, or at least the majority of them. You're either getting some rain or some snow with that system. So the interesting thing to look at here is how this one trough that starts out right here breaks into two. The first part, that little dip that you see right there, hits the Midwest and the Northeast, and then the second part dips down all the way down here into Texas. That's what's turning in to this next storm that we're going to be talking about for the next 30 minutes of this video. So at this point right here, it's bringing in moisture, and that's where we'd start to see that rainfall start in Texas. Then you're going to see it move right up through Arkansas, up through Tennessee and Kentucky, into the Midwest, and then the Northeast. So you can see that it first moves down into Texas. So let's see if we can actually identify when this starts to pop up. Right here, it might be hard to see at first, but this is actually the first traces of this. You see the snow up here and the rain down here. This is almost, think of a low pressure system. It has wide circulation right here, and it's just bringing the winds in. The winds flow into the low pressure system, and then as it does, you're going to see these two bands of precipitation get closer and closer together until it finally just starts. You can almost think of like flushing a toilet, how right here, it might be when the water is spinning on the very outside, and then this low pressure system starts spinning tighter and tighter right in here, and then that's where the storm has formed, and you're getting that heavy rain right over Texas. So that's bringing in the moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and then as that trough moves up through Arkansas, like we were just seeing, that's where it starts to bring the heavy rain to Arkansas, and then into parts of Tennessee and Kentucky as well, which we'll look at in a second. But first, let's just see how much precipitation we're expected to get. You can actually see how it starts out very wide, and then it just brings it in together till it's condensed right over northeast Texas, getting over 1 inch to 2 inches, maybe even 2.5 inches of rain in northeast Texas, and then even more rain building into Arkansas, where by Sunday we could have picked up 3 to 5 inches. And then eventually that's going to strip off into Tennessee, where by Sunday night, large portions of this area right here have picked up over 4 to 5 inches of rain. So as you could just see on that map, the key spot to look at was what's going on in Arkansas. So let's try to identify the exact timing. I believe the first traces come in at 6 p.m. on Thursday, and then by 12 a.m. on Friday, looks like the system, this is when it's really starting to form. And then at 6 a.m. Friday, that's when the bulk of the system starts to hit into 12 p.m. Friday. That's where we're getting 0.2 to 0.5 inches of rain per hour. Now again, that's a ways off in the forecast, so it's not showing up as any flood warnings on the warnings map yet, but we'll have to keep our eye on it because that is certainly a lot of rain to be getting, and you can see that it's going to continue all the way into the start of next week, continuing to pick up that heavy rain with that consistent pattern of Gulf of Mexico moisture pulling in over this region. So as we click through the precipitation map, we can watch that precipitation pile up. by Sunday night into Monday, that's where large portions of Arkansas have picked up over 5 inches of rain. So we're definitely going to have to keep our eye on the flood concerns in this area. Now, there is some good news, though. When it comes to whether you'd rather have heavy rain or heavy ice, I would pick the heavy rain every day of the week, because you think about that map last week was looking like a giant strip of 1/2 inch of ice, which is extremely dangerous for roadways. It can also weigh down your power lines, create power outages. So I would say, while this could lead to some flood concerns, it's the lesser of two evils. And the reason that it's coming in as rain instead of ice has to do with the temperatures. You can see this is what the south and southeast looks like right now. Let's go to right now, or the daytime highs today. We're looking at temperatures in the 60s to even the 70s. So last week when we were looking at daytime highs, the daytime highs were below freezing. You can see that Arctic blast of cold air has officially moved out of the region. So that's why we're just getting precipitation with this storm in the form of rain instead of ice like we were last week. Now, the other interesting thing to look at here is as we get into when the storm starts to come in, there's one key spot on this map that I want to point out. Right about here, this is just a perfect example of how this whole system works out. There's the low pressure system right there. You can tell because that's where these winds are combining. So on the northern and western edge, that's where you're bringing down some of this colder air. And you can see some of those below freezing temperatures actually working their way back into northern Texas. But where you're on the southern and eastern edge of this system, that's where you're bringing in the warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. And it makes sense when you think about the fact that a low spins in a counterclockwise rotation. You can actually see the difference in color right here. Right on the right side of this low, these yellow, warmer colors are being pushed north. And then on the left side of this low, those colder colors or colder temperatures are being pushed south. And they're colliding right there. And where they collide is where you get your heavy precipitation, because that's where you're bringing in moisture. And then when that moisture collides with the colder air, the air can't hold all that moisture, and then it has to drop as rain. So that is what's bringing that heavy rain to northeast Texas right there. And then you're going to see that pattern continue and spread throughout Arkansas all the way up into Tennessee. So if we want to follow the system as it does that, we can click back through here. What we're watching is the storm form over Texas, starts to bring in that Gulf of Mexico moisture, and then it moves up, brings heavy rain to Tennessee and Kentucky. So another way to look at that, an even better way to look at that, is looking at the trough right here. It's this back end of the system that is going to be dipping down. You see it dip down all the way down into New Mexico and Texas. Right there is when it's almost like a refueling station. It started off getting moisture from the Pacific, dropped it over Washington, over 2 feet of snow there. Then it runs out of moisture as it moves through Colorado, getting a little snow, but very light. And then right around here, it's almost a refueling station where it just gets more and more moisture pulling in from the Gulf of Mexico. And as it does that, it's going to continue to bring heavy rain throughout this entire region. You see it move right through Arkansas, then through Tennessee and Kentucky. So if we want to actually zoom in on those regions, let's see when the system appears to first show up. Some light rain over the next couple days. That's not our system. The one we're looking at looks like it'll start to move in around Friday morning is when Mississippi and Alabama are getting that heavy rain. And then it starts to move farther north as we get through the day Friday, working into Saturday morning. And the thing about this system is it's not just one blast and it's done. It appears to be continuing. It's like an overall conveyor belt of moisture over this region for a number of days that those heavy rains continue all the way through Saturday, through Sunday, still getting 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour right above Tennessee and Kentucky. So there are periods where you're getting very heavy rain, and then that heavy rain seems to be continuing for a number of days. So when that happens, you're bound to pick up large amounts of total accumulated precipitation, and you can see that on this map. Every time I click, it just seems like we pick up more and more rain. So by the start of next week, looks like large portions of northern Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, even working into West Virginia, have picked up over 6 to 7 inches of rain right there. So like I was saying earlier, this isn't showing up on the warnings map yet for any flood concerns, but because it's far enough out in the future that it's not showing up yet. But we'll have to keep our eye on it because that is certainly a lot of rainfall to be getting in just the course of a few days. Now, there's also another part of the system to keep in mind, and it has to do with the winds. So let's see where this system first starts to come in precipitation-wise. It looks like it first starts coming in Friday morning. So let's see if we can see that on the wind map as well. It looks like Friday morning, that's where these larger wind values start to show up. See it, heavier winds starting in Mississippi where we're 39 mile per hour wind gusts, and then those winds spread into Tennessee and Kentucky where we're getting 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts in West Virginia as well. That seems to be continuing throughout the day Friday all the way into Saturday morning, and then seem to be easing up as that continued rain just continues to pile up over this region. Seems like the first burst of this system is when we're mixing that rain with those extreme winds. So let's take a local look because this is sometimes the easier way to figure out the exact timing. Looks like it's showing up 6 a.m. Friday. By 12 p.m. Friday, you're still mostly in the light rain. Some heavy rain starts to show up in Tennessee, and then the real heavy rain starts to move in at 12 a.m. on Saturday. And then that looks to continue for basically all weekend long. That's why your totals are so great, because you're continuing to pile it up all the way into the start of next week. As we click through the total precipitation, this is what you're expected to get by Saturday at 6 p.m. At this point, Tennessee's still maybe 2 inches, Kentucky or maybe an inch, inch and a half. And then as we continue to click through and those heavy rains continue to come, by 6 a.m. on Monday, that's where you've picked up maybe 6 to 8 inches of rain. So it looks like the bulk of this system is actually on the second wind where some more rain starts to push in Sunday and Monday. So we'll have to keep our eye on that as we continue to forecast this in the future. Now, like I said earlier, I might have just said a lot of bad news. We have 6 to 7 inches of rain with 50 mile per hour wind gusts, but there is some good news. I would rather, and this might just be my personal preference, but I personally would rather have rain and wind than the extreme ice that we were getting last week, where in parts of Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, we were picking up over a half an inch of ice. And that is not going to be the case with this storm. At least it doesn't appear to be at this point in time because of what's going on with the temperatures. You can see early Friday morning, there's still some parts of Kentucky that are below freezing. If the storm moved through it this time, then there might be some concern for ice because right on that border, we were talking about this a lot last week, right on that border is where you can drop some rain. And then if the surface, think of cold concrete, is below freezing right along that borderline, that's where it turns into freezing rain and ice and things get dangerous. But as this system actually moves in throughout the day Friday and Saturday, you can see how warm it is throughout Tennessee and Kentucky. You're in the 40s to 50s, so that's why it's mostly going to be falling as rain, and ice isn't as much of a factor with this storm. Now, you might be thinking, what's going on here in West Virginia and North Carolina, though, because we do have this strip of below freezing air. And that actually is going to impact the precipitation they're getting in this region, as there will be some locations picking up some snow with this system. So as we move in here, sorry if you can hear that large truck backing up in reverse in the background. Hopefully my mic isn't good enough to pick that up. So just getting into this storm moving through West Virginia and Virginia, it almost perfectly coincides with where we have those below freezing temperatures. That's where we're able to pick up some snow between West Virginia and Virginia here. And then that's going to continue. We start to get some more heavy rain throughout the region, even one little bit of ice early Saturday morning. But again, compared to last week, that ice is nothing. Last week we had an entire strip of over a half an inch of ice throughout this entire region. So, like I said, there is one area though that is going to be getting some snow. But first, let's just look at the rain that's going to be coming in. Looks like, think of that right there as most likely snow. When it comes to rain, this region is actually far less than Arkansas, Mississippi, Tennessee. Looks like most of North Carolina is actually under an inch at this point. As we get into Sunday into Monday, that's where most of North Carolina and Virginia have worked into 1 to 2 inches of rain. But what we're really interested in is that snowfall, because that's where their forecast is very different from the rest of the country, or at least the rest of the storm as it has started to develop in Texas through the southeast. At this point, we're picking up some snow, but I paused there because I noticed how different this looks from yesterday's forecast. Yesterday's forecast, we had over 6 inches of snow building into North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia here, even 8 inches in some places. Right now, it's looking like more in the 2 to 4 inch range. And if I had to put forward my theory on why that might be, I would say it has to do with this. Let's see if we could find it. This pattern as it moves through. So remember this trough, it dips down into Texas. Yesterday, this looked like it was moving a little bit farther into Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. Right there, you can see the bulk of this system where we have that little dip right there moves straight above Arkansas and into the Midwest. Yesterday, it was taking a longer path over the southeast, so that was allowing it to bring in more moisture. And where you have more moisture, you get more snow by the time it gets into Virginia and North Carolina. So let's see if there's any chance of, I actually found it again, I think. Yeah, so that's what we were just looking at. So I think I messed up there. Okay, that's what we were just looking at. Less snow, and the reason for that is because it's taking that path more right above Arkansas instead of continuing over the southeast, continuing to pull in moisture, which would have allowed more of this snowfall to fall. That's where we're in the 2 to 4 inch range instead of the 6 to 8 inch range like we saw yesterday. So now looking at the local view, exact timing of this as it moves through. This is about 1 p.m. on Friday is when that first bit of rain starts to move in, possibly some light snow in North Carolina, and then this looks to be the bulk of the snowfall for Virginia and West Virginia, building in 7 p.m. on Friday, while the majority of North Carolina is covered in rainfall. That some of that snow continues, might get some slight ice early Saturday morning as we were talking about, and then on the back end of the system, that's where it starts to bring in the warm temperatures, so you're just getting heavy rainfall throughout the entire back end of the system. Getting into Sunday and Monday, we're going to have to keep our eye out for some flood concerns as we're getting 0.2 to 0.5 inches of rain per hour throughout Virginia, North Carolina. That'll certainly lead to some decent rainfall accumulations. So just a more local look at the accumulated snowfall right there in North Carolina looks to be our bullseye, 2 to 4 inches. Like I said, much less than what yesterday was showing. But this is still a little ways off in the forecast, so I guarantee that's going to change. So we'll just have to stay tuned and stay updated with the models there. Now, after this system moves through the southeast, it's still going. We're still talking about this. After it moves through the southeast, it's going to move up into the Midwest and Northeast. But before we talk about that, we're going to have to look at the light snowfall moving to the Midwest right now, which will be moving into the Northeast later. And then on the back end of the system, it's actually the same system. We've been talking about this, but the back end of that trough that's bringing the snow right now is going to dip down into Texas, pick up some more moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, work through the southeast, and then move back up and bring some snowfall to the Midwest and the Northeast. So this one system has 2 different parts. You can see it better on this map. There's the little tiny trough going through the Midwest right now, bringing very light snowfall to parts of the upper peninsula of Michigan, and then that goes into the Northeast. The back end drops down here into Texas and then moves back up into the Midwest. So there's really 2 systems in this one system that we have to be looking at. I'm not going to spend too much time on this first part because for the most part, this first part of the system is already gone. You were getting some snowfall early this morning, and by this afternoon, that's gone. What we're interested in is when this new system starts to come in. Looks like some snow Friday night into early Saturday morning. It's when we're getting, it's actually showing up in the same places as that first spot, mostly in northern Wisconsin into the upper peninsula of Michigan, and where we get some of that lake effect snow here in lower Michigan. But again, that's just a quick mover. It's not like the southeast where we're picking up large amounts of rainfall for a number of days, picking up 5 to 6 inches of rain, or it's not like Washington where we're getting continued snowfall for 4 days, picking up 3 feet of snow. In this region, it looks like the snow comes through real fast, and then as soon as it comes in, it's gone. So if we look at the totals in that area, looks like we're 1 to 2 inches just with what's coming in throughout the day today, and then some parts of the upper peninsula and Michigan getting 2 to 4 inches. Now what we're interested in is that second part of the system that moves through by Sunday into Monday. Like I said, it's a light dusting. It just kind of goes over the region real fast, drops some light snow, and then it's gone. So it looks like in total by Sunday, maybe 2 to 4 inches throughout Wisconsin here, up into the upper peninsula of Michigan, possibly getting into the 6-inch range if you're right in this bullseye. But elsewhere, you're probably in the 1 to 3 inch range. So I would by no means call this a major snowstorm, but it is something to note as it's certainly happening. And it is, that second part of the system is a little farther off in the forecast, so we will have to keep our eye on it to see what exactly does happen. There's that snow this morning, and like I said, by about right now, you're getting the last little traces of that snow, and then it's gone. You might get some last lingering lake effect snow throughout the day, Thursday, and then right on 1 a.m. Saturday is when that new system starts to bring in some snow to northeastern Wisconsin and parts of Michigan. It continues to 7 a.m. Saturday, and then by 1 p.m. Saturday, it's gone. So like I said, it's a quick mover. That's why your totals aren't going to be in the foot to foot and a half range. Going to be more like 2 to 4 inches because it comes through and then it's gone. So just taking a local look at what we're just talking about with the totals, looks like northeastern Wisconsin, 1 to 2 inches. There's this strip right here. If we combine it with the second part of the system, that's where your totals might get into the 6-inch range, but for the most part, 2 to 4 inches throughout the upper peninsula of Michigan. Now, one thing you probably noticed on the snowfall map is it only seemed to be affecting very northern parts of Wisconsin, the upper peninsula of Michigan, very upper Michigan right here. And the reason for that is because the change in temperatures. You can see how much warmer it is here than last week. And I'm sure that is a blessing. Even if you were possibly looking forward to some snow, I'm sure you're very excited to no longer be in those 40 to 50 below average temperatures that we're seeing the last 2 weeks. Right now, we're actually a little bit above average. And that's why the snow is only up in the very northern parts of the Midwest, where you can see this blue color, which represents where we're below freezing. The rest of the Midwest is above freezing. It's actually in the 50s in some places, even the 60s. So that's why we're only getting that snow in the very northern parts of the Midwest. Elsewhere, you might get a little bit of rain, but not much, as this system overall doesn't look like it's all that major. Now, it's the similar story as we watch this low move off into the northeast. This is going to be happening later today. It's actually going to start this afternoon and then continuing to tonight. It's a similar story as that low moves through. It's such warm temperatures that it's only the very northern locations that are going to be picking up any snow with that system. And it actually makes sense. You think about the circulation around a low pressure on this left side and upper side right here, that's where you're bringing down the cold air. Down here, that's where you're pulling in warm air. So when your low itself is moving above New York, you're mostly in the region that's pulling in that warm air, which means you're mostly out of the region that's getting snowfall. So keep that in mind with this second thing to keep in mind for the Northeast. There's two different things going on there. One, it's that snowfall that's moving in today, but again, mostly in the north because it's so warm. And then 2, it's the second part of the system that's dipping down, grabbing some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, working its way up through the southeast, and then bringing snow to the northeast as we get into the weekend. If you want to see that another way, there's that dip bringing the snow today, and then there's the back end of the system dipping down and then bringing that moisture right up into the northeast. So if we want to look at that another way, there's the snow we're going to be getting today. Like I said, the very northern locations looks like it's actually going to be even more northerly than yesterday's model was showing. New York, for the most part, looks like you're out of this first system, maybe getting the tail end where you think about the winds here. That's where it starts to push that cold air down, where you might actually be cold enough to get some snow in New York by tonight into early Thursday morning. Now, I don't actually think that's the big part of the story here. I think the big part of the story is what's going on with this second system that you can see starts to pop up Friday night into early Saturday morning as Pennsylvania starts to get some snow, and then it spreads out over the region. It looks like this is a little more widespread because, think about it, since this low is coming from the south, at the very beginning, the winds are going to be flowing into the low, which means the winds will be pulling that cold air down, which is why at the very beginning, we're actually able to get some snow down here in Pennsylvania and widespread areas of New York as we get into Saturday morning. Then as we get into Saturday afternoon, that's where we're getting some heavier snowfall rates in northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and then rainfall throughout the rest of the Northeast before that system moves off. So if we want to look at that snowfall come in, like I said, not much going on today. If you're in the very northern locations of New England, you might get 1 or 2 inches. But what we're interested in is really that second part of the system that looks to be bringing a bit more snow, and the snow is a bit more spread out. It's more widespread, stretching all the way down here into Pennsylvania. Not much, maybe getting an inch or 2. And then up here in northern New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, that's where you could be getting into the 6-inch range by this Sunday. So that's where we'll have to keep our eye on, as both of these systems look like they're mostly northern systems. That's why the farther north you go, the more snow you're getting. And the main reason for that is because of those warm temperatures that aren't allowing that snowfall to fall as that low moves through. It's falling as some rain instead. And you know what would actually be interesting to do here? I wasn't planning on it, so bear with me here. Let's see when that next system starts moving through and bringing that snow to Pennsylvania. I want to see if we can actually see those cold temperatures being pulled down. So it looks like that's Friday night into Saturday morning. That's where we're getting that snow in Pennsylvania. So let's go into Friday. Interesting. So it looks like there is cold air over the area, but it's actually for a different reason. I was thinking it was going to be because of wind being pulled down into the low pressure system as it moves up from the southeast, but it's actually due to a high pressure system that's sitting off the coast. So it's almost the exact opposite of what I was thinking earlier. So a high pressure system rotates in a clockwise direction, the exact opposite of a low. So it's actually pushing some of this. This is very interesting. It's pushing some of that moisture into the northeast, which should technically be making it warmer. So that is very strange. Actually, all right, so this is the end of the live stream anyway, so it's kind of fine that I'm just clicking around here. We will get into the northeast totals, but this actually explains it. We had to go farther back. This is part of the dangers of freestyling in a live stream. The cold air was actually brought in by the high pressure as it moved through the Midwest. That's where you can see the winds pulling this cold air down. That makes sense for why that cold air is in place over the Northeast when that second low pressure system comes in. It was left over from what that high brought in. So keep that in mind for when that snow starts pushing in from the south. It's actually not because it's pulling down cold air. It's because that high right there that I should have noticed earlier had already moved through the region and pulled that cold air down. So just a little freestyle there. Interesting to see. But yeah, why not just go towards it when you've already been live streaming for an hour? You can play around a little bit, I figure. So there's another part of the story. There's also going to be some extreme winds with it. So that's as the system moves in throughout the day today and getting into tonight and early tomorrow morning. Parts of New York, I believe, are actually in a high wind warning where there's 45 to 50 mile per hour wind gusts as that first part of this system moves through, bringing those high winds to Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine as well. Then you notice it clears up. That's right when the high pressure is moving through. High pressure is usually associated with lighter winds, so that makes sense. That's when it's bringing the cold air down. And then when this new system comes in from the south, it's going to bring the extreme winds with it. You can see as we get into Saturday, it first comes through Pennsylvania actually, and then moves up into New York, 45 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts as that snow is spreading over New York. So that's, I think, going to be the key time that we're going to have to look out for this storm. As we're mixing that snowfall with 50 mile per hour wind gusts, that's where you can reduce visibility and things can get dangerous. We'll have to stay updated with the warnings there. So if we want to see the local look, like I said, into tonight, we're still getting some snow with that first part of the system, just light as we get that low moves through right there, bringing snow to New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, just some light snow, maybe an inch or two. The second part of the system has moved in here by 1 p.m. on Saturday and then into 7 p.m. on Saturday. That looks to be the bulk of the system. Saturday afternoon into Saturday evening, where we're mixing those 0.2 inches per hour of snowfall with those 50 mile per hour wind gusts. So that's the key time we're going to have to look out for there. As we look at the accumulated snowfall, that's what it's expected to fall throughout the day today. Maybe 1 to 3 inches in very northern parts of New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. But for the most part, large portions of the state actually not getting any snow at all, as the temperatures remain too warm in those regions to get snow. And then as that next part of the system goes through, that's where we could start seeing some totals in the 6 to 8 inch range. You see a couple bullseyes here in northeastern or northern parts of New York, in parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. We might be getting over 6 inches. For the most part though, 2 to 4 inches. So again, I wouldn't be calling this a major snowstorm yet. But again, the second system hits this weekend, which is still a few days off. And I've noticed in my experience that the weather forecast models aren't the best with predicting snowfall more than 3 days out. So we're going to have to stay updated with this. I guarantee the final map will not end up looking like that. But as of right now, that's what that's showing, and we'll just have to stay tuned. So we talked about a lot in this video, went a little bit long today, but I'll try to just wrap it up in a quick forecast summary. The big story we talked about is this system that's splitting off into two. The first part of it is hitting the Midwest and the Northeast right now and then into this evening, bringing some light snowfall. Now the back end of that system is going to drop down and strengthen right over Texas, bringing some heavy rain to Texas, then Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky. There's a strip of heavy rainfall right there where we could be seeing 6 to 7 inches of rain. So we're going to have to stay updated with any flood warnings that might be put into effect as that system comes in. Then it's going to start to bring some snow to West Virginia, North Carolina, and then finally work its way up into the Northeast, bringing snow to the northern states there, as the majority of the eastern half of the country is still warm. So that explains why both of these storms are mostly just bringing snow to the very upper peninsula of Michigan and the very northern parts of the Northeast. It's because of these temperatures right here. You can see how far above average we are. In some cases, 15 to 20 degrees above average. And what that's doing is as these storms come through, that's right about when they're coming through, you can see large portions of this region are above average temperatures. So you're not cold enough to be getting your precipitation as snow. Most locations will just be getting rain with this one. It's great to see that there's a tiny strip of ice in North Carolina and Virginia, but compared to last week, very little ice, which is great to see. just rain throughout the southeast. Again, we'll have to stay updated with the flood warnings, and then that light snow throughout the very northern portions of the Midwest and Northeast. Now, the one other thing we talked about is that new system that's going to be pushing through the Northwest. This one, I believe, is actually the big story for today. That's where we're picking up maybe 2 to 3, possibly even more than 3 feet of snow in the Cascades of Washington, over a foot of snow in Oregon, and we're combining that with 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. So that is where, let's see if I can find the map here. That is where we have some extreme impacts expected throughout the Cascades in northern Washington, and then through Idaho as well, where we're mixing heavy snowfall accumulations with extreme wind gusts. Now, one final look at the warnings here. For the most part, good weather forecast today, not much going on across the country. Great to see the extreme weather giving us a little bit of a break. Now, as I just said though, there is still some extreme weather up here in Washington and Oregon, where we're expecting over 3 feet of snow in the northern Cascades, mixed with that high wind warning, and there's actually even a blizzard warning in effect over Idaho and Montana. Not sure why it's not showing up on this map. It should be, because we're picking up over a foot of snow with 50 mile per hour winds. That leads to reduced visibility. Now, the key thing I'll be looking out in tomorrow's forecast and forecast moving forward is if we start to see some flood warnings popping up between Texas all the way up into Tennessee, Kentucky, and Virginia here, we're most likely going to see some flood warnings pop up. So we'll have to keep our eye on that. If you want to stay tuned, you can subscribe to this channel where I do these daily forecasts every single day. So thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.